Synthetics by Lucas Alpi. Chapter 5. Catherine Miller watched a footage of Matthew masturbating. The monitor's glow cast a pale light over her face, flickering in shades of green and gray. The room was dim, as it always was during these observational sessions. A sterile, windowless space deep underground, buried beneath layers of reinforced steel. The air was stale, humming with the faint vibrations of the ventilation system, the dull electronic buzz of machines running on loops. The image on screen wasn't new. She had spent years in this facility watching worse things, things that made this seem almost juvenile. But it was the first time she had watched a subject do this. Matthew Rowley, confined in his isolation chamber, lay half buried beneath his sheets, his stroking movements deliberate, unashamed. The grainy security footage made it impersonal, yet Catherine still felt something cold crawl up her spine. If she weren't the head of the division, she would have pushed this off onto someone else. Yet here she was, surrounded by behavioral scientists, biopsychologists, military analysts, the best in the field, all of them watching, taking notes. Most of their faces were unreadable, except for a few who looked bored, almost impatient. Protocol, surveillance. Everything had to be recorded.
Some men are so disgusting,
Catherine thought, tapping her pen against the clipboard in front of her. The footage ended. The lights clicked on, washing the room in a harsh fluorescence. Catherine stood first, red hair catching the light as she straightened her lab coat. The others took it as their cue to follow.
like follow the leader.
She thought dryly.
And I'm the f***ing leader.
A door hissed open, and they filed out into the hallway.
I want your reports by tomorrow,
She said. No smile, no goodbye. She didn't wait for acknowledgments. Her heels clicked against the polished floors as she moved past the glass-walled labs, scanning the faces of the workers inside. Most didn't look up. They were hunched over microscopes, tablets, and terminals, lined with endless streams of data. This was her routine, her prison, every day, every hour. She had lived in this cycle so long that the world above felt like a myth. She didn't see the sun much. Her skin was proof of that. And then, something different. A disruption to the routine. A man that she just saw right at that moment.
I somehow despise your friend.
The words came out before she could stop them. It wasn't planned, wasn't part of her usual rounds, but the thought had been scratching at her skull for weeks, and confrontation had always been her strongest nature. Richard didn't flinch. He scratched his head, shifting in his chair before looking up at her.
Well, Richard,
She continued, voice smooth but sharp.
you recommended him.
She shook her head.
That's the last time I let kindness influence my judgment.
Richard sighed and turned back to his microscope, his screens flashing sequences of numbers and molecular models.
You don't know how sorry I am.
Catherine folded her arms, watching him. A syntheticist, one of the best. But even the best made errors.
He's a good man, you know, and it was just an accident.
Her lip curled.
I don't care if he's the Pope, Richard. In here, when you handle things, you don't make mistakes. And please,
She leaned in slightly, voice low, clipped.
don't believe in accidents. Believe in miscalculations leading to greater consequences. Miscalculations should be eliminated. They should be forethought.
And right now, she was thinking of eliminating Matthew with a bullet between the eyes. Richard shifted again, eyes darting toward the other scientists in the lab. They pretended not to listen, but she knew they were. It didn't matter. She had no shame in calling him out. No shame at all.
Just do your work.
That's what she always told them.
That's why you're here. Nothing more.
I'll make it up.
Richard said, voice firm.
I know there's no excuse, so I'll make it up.
That, at least, was an answer she could accept. Without another word, she grabbed a clipboard off his desk, skimming the updates on the project.
How's the virus?
she asked, eyes flicking toward his monitors. With a few keystrokes, Richard pulled up a rendering, a 3D model of the strain, a twisted shape between icosahedral and helical structures.
Harder than I thought,
He admitted.
Chimpanzee DNA and immunity are more complex than I calculated. Got 3 given. All dead. Brain resists too much or does nothing. Either way, it shuts down. Shortest lifespan, a day. Longest, a week.
Bacteria?
They're too complex. Means another 4 years of work. Can't afford that.
Catherine lowered the clipboard.
You can request SDP techs.
She said.
They might have a strain you need. Ask for a favor or something.
Richard smirked.
Can't you just tell me if they do?
She shrugged.
My brain's not a computer. I can't store that much information. That's the long form of I don't know.
Not yet.
Excuse me?
Your brain is not a computer yet.
She almost smiled at that.
Unfortunately so.
Then, without another word, she left him to his work. She moved through the West Wing, passing row after row of cubicles and labs, where scientists sat hunched over their screens, their petri dishes, their biosynth projects, hundreds of them, all dressed in the same white coats, drowning in numbers, formulas, genetic sequences. The air smelled of antiseptic and machine oil. The only sounds were the scraping of paper, the rhythmic clicks of keyboards. No one spoke. They knew she was there, watching. And she knew that the second she left, the private chat servers would light up with conversations, meaningless chatter about relationships, weekend plans, gossip. People still found ways to be people. But Catherine wasn't interested in that. Her mind was elsewhere, beyond this floor, beyond this moment. What would the world look like when she was in her 70s? This was one of the thoughts that crawled to her every once in a while, among, of course, countless others.
What would it be like having a technology like this?
She thought. The technology of a man-made virus, man-made bacteria, man-made pathogens. It could heal the world, and it could lay waste to any form of opposing government without firing lead, with no one dying. It would be the next step in evolution. The sci-fi authors of the century were always thinking it would be robots or AI. But in her opinion, synthetic life forms were the answer. Synthetic life, grown, controlled, replicated, expensive now, yes, but once the perfect model was achieved, it would reshape the world. A future without borders, without opposition. A dream, a revelation. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. The sound cut through the air like a gunshot. She answered immediately, barely slowing her stride.
What is it?
A hesitant pause on the other end. Then a voice.
Ma'am, Stephen Ang is dead.
Catherine stopped. Her fingers tightened around the phone. For the first time that day, the scientists in the room looked up. Silence. Then, slowly, Catherine exhaled.
Crap.